In the early morning hours today in Israel, another round of 23 Iranian missiles slammed into a number of Israeli targets and caused significant damage. This is continuing a pattern that we've seen since the beginning of this, when the Iranian side has begun using its long-range missiles to strike targets in Israel. Israel, for its part, continues to hammer targets in Iran. They continue to hit things in Tehran. They continue to even to hit some of the associated nuclear sites, but also IRGC sites and other regime-related sites as well. Both sides are hitting energy infrastructure between the other, and both sides are causing lots of damage. The question is, who is going to be able to outlast the other? Because this is so far like two big heavyweights just landing, body blow after body blow. I know in the West, the popular mentality, especially in the media, is that it's a David and Goliath situation, with Israel ironically being the Goliath in this story, that they have this power and they're just pummeling little Iran. I mean, how many times have we shown, even in the last few days, comments by a number of military people or so-called experts in the United States that said Iran is just this weak person, this weak side, that they're on their last legs, that they're not going to be able to sustain much longer. They can't endure underneath this Israeli bombardment, that even the regime could fall, that maybe the popular uprising could come up on top of that, etc. So, like, this is going to be over pretty quick. I think I showed you 2 or 3 days ago a headline in Israel that said they think they can have this wrapped up in a couple of weeks. So they're thinking pretty short term on this. One wonders, though, if they're thinking this short term, because they're like, we can't let this go too much longer than this. Because listen, Israel has, I think, bitten off more than it can chew, and it's in a real difficulty, a lot worse than is commonly understood in the West. And the reason why I use that analogy of two fighters, because Iran is also taking a beating. They are getting hit hard, so nobody's coming out of this easy. But the issue is that the conditions for succeeding are very different from the two sides. Iran can take a lot more hits. It just has to endure. It just has to survive. What the Israeli side has to accomplish attainable military objectives to win, or it comes off a strategic loser, even if it is able to put a lot of damage on the Iranian side. And I want to show something that was on CBS News earlier by Robert Pape from the University of Chicago, a well-known author and studied the Middle East a lot. And he was asked a very poignant question, which was not real popular among many in the United States, when he talked about how effective bombing could be.
I want to emphasize that it is probably too late for air power alone to do the job. And you're seeing that Israel already knows it can't do the job alone. But even with America, there's a big problem. And the big problem is the size of the nuclear stockpile of enriched material that Iran has. Even if America can destroy 90% of that enriched material, that would still leave enough for at least one nuclear bomb. And the idea that any air power, any airstrike can guarantee 100%, I don't think so. And I think Donald Trump knows that's not true either. And that's what's going on here.
So I think that that is could be, anyway, one of the reasons why Trump, kind of out of nowhere, after having sent a True Social post 2 or 3 days ago of unconditional surrender, like he was going to give the Iranians the only option of either surrender or die, basically. Then all of a sudden did an about face, and instead of starting a bombing campaign by the United States, and as we've told you, there's been a profound amount of military capacity, both in the air and on the sea, being sent to the region. There are 3 aircraft carrier strike groups either there or on the way there. There is tons of air capacity, dozens of aerial refueling tankers that have gone there, huge numbers of C-17s, C-5 Globemasters, just stuffed full of all kinds of military capacity. Lots of things moving around on the air and on the sea, really on multiple sides of this issue here, all in range of Iran. So it looked like that Trump was ready to do something. All of a sudden, you saw while we were actually on the air, I guess it was yesterday, that Trump said, you know what, how's about a couple of weeks? maybe we should just give diplomacy one more chance. Now, what we don't know right now, and we're going to continue to monitor this and watch the information very closely, watch for any clues, any movement of troops, etc. But it's unclear right now if Trump made this decision because he realizes, oh snap, we can't just compel a military victory. Iran is too big of a power, and we don't have enough military force, especially offensive missiles, where they're airstrikes or ground-to-ground missiles, to compel coercion from the Iranian side. So we better come up with something different. And he may also have been briefed that these GBU-57 big bunker busters, the penetration, the ones that can go 30,000 pound, ones that are allegedly can go down to about 200 feet, even that might not work, probably wouldn't work, according to Ted Postal we had on the show. Definitely go watch that video if you haven't to find out exactly why we're talking about. But he may have concluded that all I'm going to end up doing by attempting to do something that probably will fail is to put a target on our backs, possibly our ships in Bahrain, our air bases in Qatar, certainly our bases in Iraq and in Syria and in Jordan and several other places, Saudi Arabia, etc. All would be putting all that at risk for something that probably wouldn't work. So, hey, how's about some diplomacy? I hope that's the case, as opposed to I just needed a little more time to build up more combat power, and has not yet come to the realization that the missile strikes are not going to result in the submission and the subjugation of Iran. Hopefully, it's not that one, because we'll be in a bit of a problem if that is. The other thing that everybody does need to know, and certainly the president, I hope he's tracking on this, is that Israel is having a lot more damage done to it than many in the West realize. There has been an active move inside of Israel to suppress images of the destruction and the damage done inside of Israel. Some's coming out, but a lot of it is there's actively being suppressed. And it's really taken a lot of people by surprise. There's just some of the scenes you're seeing right there. But there was, and on the 16th, on June 16th, there was some reports that came out that there was a research facility that had been hit. And this is something that was a real big problem here, because there was lots of research that Israel had done, and it was a major facility that got hit. Gary, if you could put that first full screen up there, that would be great. One of Israel's prestigious institutes suffers heavy damage in Iranian attack. That is on the 16th. Then on the 19th, there was another report come out. It said Israel is left with no refining operating, surging fuel deficit after Iranian strikes. So Iran, just like we saw this, you may recall that big, massive video of the refinery inside Tehran that was struck. I think it was the second day of the war, just massive fire. That's going in both directions. So now Iran is also taking under fire the Israeli side, which puts all of their operations at risk. If you don't have enough fuel, you can't even keep your tanks going in Syria, where they have still some vehicles, possibly into Lebanon if they want to go into there, and definitely not in the Gaza Strip. And that's on top of course, all of the civilians that are just having regular vehicles. If you lose the ability to process and make enough fuel, you're going to be in a real fuel deficit, and then you're going to have to start deciding where you're going to run things and what you're going to operate and what you're not. It could potentially have to put a refinement under constraints where you can only buy so much gasoline, etc. Then on the on the 20th, that's today, there was today there was this another Iranian strike decimates an Israeli Science Institute. And listen, this is a direct retaliation. You see what Israel has hit in Iran. Iran is hitting in Israel. So Israel started off and they assassinated a lot of nuclear scientists and other scientists in the Iranian regime. And now the Iranians are hitting Israeli situation here. And you can see part of that picture right there where a big science institute was hit. And they were interviewing some of the scientists, and they were just devastated by this because of a lot of the research that had been lost, and permanently lost, because it was all the facilities were destroyed, the computers, the files, etc., setting them back. So Israel is hurting. And, it's just ironic that despite again, those are open source. You see, I'm pulling stuff from the 16th, the 19th, and today. This news is out there for anyone willing to just look. But instead, the narrative coming out of the so-called elite class in Washington just continues to operate on the narrative. You may recall some number of months ago, one of our guests really was talking about the Russia-Ukraine war, but put it so good. He said that the Western side was operating and making decisions based on a narrative, whereas the Russians were taking operations and making policies based on reality. And that disparity between the two was resulting in the Western side with Ukraine losing. That same thing is continuing to go on here. In light of what I just told you about how Israel is really taking some body blows from Iranian missiles, here's what Newt Gingrich says about this situation, how he views it.
When historians look back and say, did Donald Trump really make a difference? Think about this. The original Ayatollah Khomeini first started calling us the Great Satan in 1978. Iranian mobs began chanting death to America in 1979 when they seized illegally the American embassy. They have been taunting us, attacking us, harassing us all these years through all these presidents. And finally, they have collided with Donald J. Trump, and he's crossed the line. He and Netanyahu are partners, much like Reagan and Margaret Thatcher were partners. And the two of them are going to change history.
Yeah, see, because to him, it's easy. We are going to go in there and we are going to pummel them and we're going to destroy their nuclear weapons making capacity. And we're going to reorient the entire Middle East. That's what we said in 2003, by the way, with that regime change operation to get Saddam Hussein out. Remember, we were going to completely reorient the Middle East, and it was going to be this new American Western-friendly place. There wasn't going to be any more conflict because everybody was going to be in love with America, in love with democracy and all that kind of stuff. How'd that work out for you? We know for sure how that worked out. It was terrible. We took what was a bulwark against Iran, by the way, and then turned it into a now Iranian-friendly place. We got rid of after 13 years, and God only knows how many people were killed and how many tens of billions of dollars were squandered trying to bring that regime change to an end. Finally did succeed. Bashar al-Assad left, and who do we put in charge but somebody that used to be part of al-Nusra, used to be part of ISIS, etc. And oh, sure, he put on a suit and cleaned up his beard, but it's the same guy that was, by some accounts, actually committing physical atrocities and killing people, etc. There has definitely been a lot of pogroms already done as they've kind of tried to consolidate power, and they've killed a lot of their opponents. So that's already happening there. We don't know how that's going to work out here, but people generally don't change who they really are, whatever kind of clothes they wear. So we'll see how that's going to play out. But now then, aside from all of that, he's still talking the same thing here. We're going to reorient the Middle East, and we're going to win. Even though you see Israel has embarked on, what are we on, day 8, I think, of this? They're 19 months into the war in Hamas, against Hamas, and they still haven't won. And in fact, the number of Hamas fighters, according to Israel, is something close to what it was at the beginning, i.e., as we warned from the very beginning, that since this channel existed, that Israel had pursued a military course to try to obtain a political outcome of security for its people that will fail. And we showed you very tangibly why it would fail, and it's playing out exactly that way. Nothing brilliant on my part. I read. I just observe, and I see what happens, and I understand how human behavior works when you're trying to compel people to do things, etc. It's not hard. You got centuries of examples to go by. It's playing out like it always does. It's not hard to figure out. We just don't want to, because that's not our narrative. So we're continuing to go down this path. Well, it's not just Newt Gingrich. If it was just one off, that's one thing. But now here's another retired 4-star general, Wes Clark, who wrote in the Wall Street Journal. He has this great idea to how we can have a negotiated settlement. We don't have to win this by war. Newt Gingrich was talking about that, Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu are going to kind of go in there and be war heroes like Reagan and Thatcher and overturn everything, blah, blah, blah. Well, at least Wes Clark is saying, give diplomacy a chance with Iran. But what kind of diplomacy does he come up with? He writes that, quote, Mr. Trump, however, has the leverage to achieve a two-track approach, a diplomatic solution that would defang the regime. Mr. Trump could require Iran to stop all nuclear efforts and give up uranium enrichment permanently, renounce its aims to destroy Israel and the U.S., and end its hegemonic aspirations and cease supporting terrorism. In return, the U.S. wouldn't destroy it. I mean, what kind of nonsense is that? You call that a diplomacy? Look, that's what a parent says to a child, basically. Do what I say, or I'm going to ground you, or you're going to get a spanking, something like that. Because I'm the parent, you're the kid. I'll just tell you what. And for him to say that Trump, Gary, can you put that back up there again for a second? For him to say that Trump could require Iran to stop all its nuclear efforts and give up its enrichment. Dude, have you not been paying attention? Iran said that's their red line. They won't do that. We don't have the authority to compel them to do that. We cannot say the non-proliferation treaty, the nuclear treaty that governs most nations of the world, which we're signatories to, which Iran is a signatory to, they have the authorization to have low levels of nuclear reprocessing. So you can't tell them no, even though you say, yeah, but you could use it someday to develop a bomb. We don't want you to have that capacity even. Fair enough. That's your preference, but that's not the reality, because they do have the legal right to do so, and you can't compel them to not do that legally anyway. More than just technically, though, we don't have the capacity. We can't just compel and force them to do so, because that would mean flat out going to war against Iran. And I don't mean just having some airstrikes. I mean, you'd have to go to war with Iran, invade the country like you did with Iraq, and roll into Tehran, take over the country, impose whatever rules you want, insert whatever country government you want, assuming that you could kill enough Iranians, etc. Well, obviously, we don't have the military for that. We can't launch any kind of a ground incursion in Iran. That would be absurd. What is it? Iran, I think, is like 2 or 3 times bigger than Iraq was. And you know how big Iraq was. It was huge. I served there. I fought one war in Kuwait, actually, in the southern part of Iraq. And then I was deployed there once during Operation Iraqi Freedom in 2009. Did a lot of driving around in combat vehicles and patrols, whatever. I know how big that place is. And if Iran is substantially larger, and their military spread out a lot further, and it's a much more capable military force than Iraq had, than we had, you're not going to do it. So like Robert Pape said, it's too late. You're not going to bomb somebody into oblivion. You're certainly not going to launch a few airstrikes and the country's going to be military defeated when they have the capacity to strike back at you and hurt you bad. And just like the Iranians can strike back and hit the Israelis, they can also strike back and hit Americans. We have all of these troops in there that are points of vulnerability, that are just pawns on a chessboard, because we cannot keep them safe. If we get into a fight with Iran and Iran strikes at these any of those bases you see on there with Bahrain, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Syria, Jordan, etc., Oman, all those different places, UAE, just ducks in a barrel. The same way that Ted Postal showed you where scores of ballistic missiles went through the entire integrated air defense system of the Israeli side and hit their targets. The same thing would happen to us as well. And they could knock out our Navy. Who knows? They could sink some of our ships, or at least cause damage, hit our airfields in Qatar, our bases, the army bases in Iraq, etc. All of those things would be just as vulnerable. And we would have casualties for no gain to our country, because you're not going to go in to fight a war. It's just going to cause a bunch of casualties. That's what's going to happen if we go forward with this. Now, there are some others, though, that are kind of trying to come to grips with this. And I'm going to play something from Jack Keane earlier today on Fox News. And for a minute, it sounds like I was going, wait, am I agreeing with him on something? Are we agreeing on something? And then at the end, it goes in a weird place. But apparently the question asked was, is this a Libya model? And just for your frame of reference before we get in there, the Libya model is one of the things I've said that is very keenly on the aware of the Iranian side, which they will avoid at all costs, which is we convinced Libya to give up their nuclear weapon program. And then after they had done so, then we changed our mind and we went in there and helped foment a revolution inside the country by using Western air power to significantly weaken the structures of support that Gaddafi used to keep control of his population, to an extent then that the population rose up and overthrew him. So many people were saying, hey, let's do a deal like that to where we weaken with all these airstrikes enough people in Iran so that the opposition can rise up and overthrow them, and we get our regime changed that way. Here's what Keene said about that.
The president is telling his confidants, I'm worried about being another Libya. Is he right to worry about that?
I think they're dramatically different countries. I mean, Iran is an educated class of people. They have a vibrant middle class and obviously a fairly wealthy upper class, despite all the economic challenges they've had under this particular regime. Libya was an impoverished country and not a widely educated country like this country is. I think there would always be a power struggle in this country that would take place. Political groups would form, and don't know what those results would be. But I think the Iranian people would have an awful lot to say about it. And they haven't had anything to say about it the last 45 years.
So it's like, yeah, all right, well, Iran is not Libya, and it's unlikely that we'd be able to have that. But, you know, we should still keep trying to go and militarily compel them to do so. So it's like he kind of lays out the rationale for not doing that, but then seems to go, but we should try anyway. It's unclear what he actually thinks is going to happen here. But fortunately, not all the news is bad. There are those who were saying, hey, we really need to do some negotiating here and actually use diplomacy. Now, one of the things that I've talked about in this 2-week period that I think I said at the outset here, that it could be Trump just waiting until military pieces are in place and he's going to try to do something anyway. Or it could be that he recognizes that military is not going to succeed, that the cost to the U.S. would be too high. He could get us sucked into an open-ended war that would have no obvious end state. And so he may be going to go to diplomacy. Well, that was helped out earlier today. And I'm going to give you that in just a second, because it was the IAEA chief who actually said, hey, I think there's a real shot at some diplomacy, and he's going to lay out the reasons why. But one thing I want to point out before we get there is to remind you of something that Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard said under Senate testimony on the 25th of March.
The IC continues to assess that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and Supreme Leader Khamenei has not authorized the nuclear weapons program that he suspended in 2003. The IC continues to monitor closely if Tehran decides to reauthorize its nuclear weapons program.
So, categorically, they don't have a program. We continue to assess that they have not given any instructions to do so. Now, she went on in that testimony to say that there are a lot of warning signs, that they are advancing their capabilities. It's something that needs to be paid attention to, all that kind of stuff. That was then directly contradicted by Benjamin Netanyahu in his launch of this current war that he's opened up with Iran by saying, well, we have different intelligence. We shared it with them and they didn't listen to it. But yeah, the Iranians were actually close. So now then we're going to go to the IAEA, who, and just so you understand, these are the folks that are on the ground in these facilities inside of Iran. Check out what he says.
The Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency tells me in an exclusive interview, Iran does have enough uranium for several nuclear bombs, and the regime is just a quick step away from enriching to weapons-grade uranium. However, he said he saw no plans for Iran to take that step. And he believes even at this stage, diplomacy is the path to prevent Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon.
I believe that there is a way to take this danger or this concern out of the table in a negotiated way with a very robust, as I said, I've been in conversations, very good conversations with Steve Witkoff and with the Iranians as well. I believe that there are ways in which we can make sure that Iran does not get a nuclear weapon.
So, Tulsi Gabbard on the 25th of March said there is no evidence of a weapons program, and we have no evidence that the Ayatollah has given it. You had it, I guess it was the 12th of June, you had Netanyahu saying, oh yeah, well, I said that they do. They do have it, and Tulsi was wrong. And then now here you have today, today. Now, on the 20th of June, you have the IAE, I guess, saying, yeah, they do have this nuclear, this reprocessed stuff up to 60%, which everyone knows about. That's open source information. But he said still, they have not made a decision to go to a nuclear weapons program, and they haven't taken any action on that. So negotiations are capable and possible. What does that tell you about the in-between part there of Benjamin Netanyahu? He was making this self-serving things. And listen, we need to be crystal clear that this guy has been saying since I think it's 2011, maybe even before that. I can't recall how far back it goes, but a long way back. He's been telling people all the time that they're almost there, that Iran is weeks away from having a nuclear weapon. Many times, I think it was like 2012. I know for sure again in 2016, he goes to the UN Security Council. The UN General Assembly speech in September of each year. Netanyahu's gone up and he has this chart of this weird bomb, which just doesn't look like a nuclear weapon. I never understood that, but he always showed you, up to the neck of the thing. They're just almost right there. They're just right on the cusp, and we can't. And it never happened. Tulsi Gabbard confirmed it hadn't happened. The IAEA Secretary General confirmed it still hasn't happened. And in between, you keep having Netanyahu say, oh, yeah, it did. Go to war for me. Go fight on a war with me. Risk getting your people killed. Just trust me. No, you don't deserve any trust because you have lied to us for decades. And we're not going to send any of our troops. And I certainly hope the president is the leader of this group here, that we are not going to send Americans to die for a war that shouldn't be fought when a negotiation settlement is possible. Trump has been seeking this from the beginning, and he's been saying, hey, listen, we want to negotiate. The Iranians have said all during this process, even though it was Trump himself who pulled out of the last agreement that we had, the JCPOA, that he got out of in 2018. Even with that sabotage of trust, they're still willing to say, we'll have a negotiated settlement. We're willing to talk about that. So there is a negotiated settlement. It's not going to include everything that we want. We don't get the luxury of just telling Iran, like Wes Clark said, you can't have anything here, and the only thing we're going to give you is to not destroy you. I mean, that is so infantile. It's absurd. It's also not possible. We can't destroy Iran. I mean, we would destroy ourselves if we wanted to try. So hopefully that's the case. One other thing that we probably will not get, I see an equally impossibility to this. Actually, I'll just say that categorically, that many in the United States have wanted. And Trump has periodically said over time that not just the nuclear program, but the missile capacity, the long-range missiles, they have to get rid of that too. We're going to include that in a new deal. We're going to have something like that. So as I've said throughout this entire process, if you want to get something really big, you've got to give something really big. And just not killing you, yeah, that ain't it. That's not going to work. You're going to have to get into some give and take diplomacy. Understand that. Even at this stage, even with Iran willing to talk, there's going to be some limitations. One of the limitations that they said, this is this morning from their foreign minister, IRGC, is this whole issue of the long-range missiles.
We have always had dialogue with the Europeans and have discussed various issues with them. Even now, if they have something to say, we are listening. We are not ashamed of defending the rights of the Iranian people, and we are not avoiding anyone. Our talks tomorrow will focus solely on the nuclear issue and, of course, regional matters. I must make it clear that we have no discussions with anyone regarding the missile issue. And if anyone had any doubts, by now it is clear to everyone that the Islamic Republic of Iran's missile capability is an exceptional defensive power for the country. Our missiles have never been intended for attacking anyone. They are for the defense of the nation. Right now, it is our missiles that are carrying out this defense and creating deterrence.
That's really important to understand where the mentality is on the Iranian side right now. They have been saying, and they have been communicating words and deeds really ever since the Israeli war against the Hamas in the Gaza Strip, and then the actions of the Houthis in the Red Sea, the actions of Hezbollah in Lebanon, etc. All the proxies that have been helping, trying to help anyway, the Palestinian people. That turned into to direct clashes between Israel and Iran in 2024. They very clearly said when Israel really appeared to be trying to go to Iran into an attack, when they destroyed the Iranian embassy by assassinating some people who were inside the building with a missile in Syria, violating every diplomatic norm that exists in the world today, Iran was very measured in its response. They wanted to avoid an all-out war. So they used their drone and missile fire to send a signal, but they did it in such a way that signaled, especially the one in April of last year, signaled ahead of time, we don't want this to go anywhere. We're sending a bunch of drones and stuff that are going to be slow flying, a bunch of cruise missiles that you can shoot down. Here they come. And it was like hours of advance notice. The U.S., France, I think, Jordan, several others, certainly the Israeli Air Force, all together shot down virtually all of them. I think one or two of them might have gotten through, but didn't cause any damage. Then in the second round, after Israel assassinated a Hamas leader inside this capital city of Tehran during the presidential inauguration, that launched the second, that precipitated the second one. Again, Israel is taking this incredibly provocative action militarily to try and I think goad Iran into a war. And again, Iran was very calculated in its response, but this time it went a little bit further by sending a different signal to Israel that said, hey, we're sending in a number of ballistic missiles. This time's the good one to show that your integrated air defense system, your Iron Dome, the Arrow system, the David Sling, the THAAD system, all that, it ain't going to stop this stuff. If we want to get through, we will. And we're going to show you right here. And they did. That message apparently didn't get through. Or Israel just ignored it and said, well, we're still going to do another attack here. This time we're going to try to make sure the U.S. comes in. So this time they just went on a flat out global attack. And they just went on basically a preemptive war. And they had unprovoked attack Iran, claiming that they knew they were getting close to a bomb, which incidentally, even by itself, is not justification to attack another country. That's only if you're physically about to be attacked. That's the only time where you can get into an area where you can defend a preventive war, is if you're about to be attacked, and that wasn't the case. That's not even what Israel's claiming. As a matter of fact, Benjamin Netanyahu, in his first speech, said, well, they could have been a year away. That's so absurd. Even he can't lie too much, I guess. And he said, yeah, they could have been a year away, but that's not the point. No, that's absolutely the point. And so Israel launched this war. And now then Israel or Iran, they told you and they signaled in August or October of last year that if we get into a fight, we can penetrate your system. Now then they're demonstrating it on a daily basis. We don't know how many missiles Iran has. That's really the kind of issue here. And both sides have to really figure this out, because if Iran doesn't have that many long-range missiles, then you're going to see the number of these waves go down. You're probably at some point going to see the elevation of a lot of these drone strikes, and maybe even a combination of drone and missile strikes. We haven't seen that kind of a combination yet, like we did in 2024. So that tells me that they're reserving some capacity in the event, I think, that the United States gets involved with this, or if they get into an existential issue where they can ramp up their range of fire. So they have more to go here based on what they've shown so far. But Israel also has, according to the Wall Street Journal, according to the Washington Post, several other people have been admitting that they're running low. The New York Times, I think this morning, had another piece on that they're running low on interceptor missiles. Well, we know that you remember what is about 3 or 4 weeks ago, where Secretary Rubio told that in Senate testimony that Ukraine is asking for all kinds of interceptor missiles, more Patriots, et cetera. And he's said flatly, we don't have them. We don't have them to give, and we're not going to give any more. And now here's Israel demanding even more, now at a higher rate. So we don't have them. We didn't have them then, and we don't have them now. So that means that if we continue on this, we're going to have to start getting into our war stocks. And we're going to have to, it will continue to erode our own capacity. That's if we just give them to Israel. But if we enter the war as well, now then we'll be giving them to Israel and using them for ourselves. And I'm telling you, folks, we don't have an endless supply of interceptor missiles, even in our war stocks. And you don't want to get to the place to where we get into an open-ended fight against Iran, and then find out that they actually have quite a few missiles, more than what's been ascribed to them, or lots of these drones, etc. And they keep dragging this out and causing you to deplete your reserves more and more and more. That puts our entire national security at risk. Not just this. I'm just telling you so categorically, getting involved in a war against Iran is the worst thing we can do. Far worse than if we got than what we did in 2003, because we had plenty of capacity. The Iraqis didn't have much capacity, and there's not a whole lot they could have done at that point, because they had already been so badly weakened by the Persian Gulf War and then the 10 years of sanctions that on top of this. So they were brittle, they were weak, they were poorly equipped. They didn't have a good ballistic missile inventory. And in fact, a lot of it because of what the Iranians saw. That's why they built this. And so now it's paying dividends for them because they're able to succeed. Don't get into this. The best thing the United States can do is to take this 2-week period here as a reprieve and not launch one airstrike, because it almost certainly would not succeed to take out their nuclear facilities. You see that the Russians have sent, and Putin declared that his Russian scientists will stay at the Bushehr site. So that's one that's virtually off limits, because you attack that and you kill Russians, then you risk bringing Russia into the war, and they may do it. I think that's why Putin said that. It's taking a real risk, and we better not test that resolve there. But there is nothing to gain here. Likely, we would not even tactically succeed in knocking out their capacity, the Iranians' capacity to build a nuclear weapons program. Maybe run to the bomb, maybe build, because they do have the fissile material. You heard the IAEA inspector said there, they do have it. We've known that. I think Tulsi admitted that too, or reported that rather. So everything in the world you can see screams, do not get into a war in Iran. Do not enter this fight here, because it's one that we don't have the capacity to wage and win. And all it's going to do is weaken our entire national security capacity. And virtually, well, I mean, Ukraine's already lost. So that's really, I guess you can't say it's going to condemn them, but it might precipitate an even faster decline, because now we won't have anything to give them at all. And so whenever whatever they've got on hand runs out, that's it. They're done. And the minute that Ukraine runs out of any kind of air defense capacity here, it's game on. Russia can literally fly jets over the country, which they haven't been able to do. They can launch drone waves at will and just destroy everything that they want to, which will precipitate the collapse of the Kiev, even faster. So there is so much to lose here, and I am begging you, I'm begging the president, take this opportunity that you've created by having this 2-week window here and go ahead and have some negotiated settlements here. But understand, everybody needs to be very clear on this. And I've seen there's so many people like what I was showing you there, Senator Tom Cotton, Lindsey Graham, even Jack Keane sitting there. You saw Newt Gingrich. They still have this fantasy that we can just give instructions and commands and orders to Iran. You guys need to figure this out. We are not going to get to a negotiated settlement to avoid a war if we don't give something. And this idea that we're going to get rid of their missile program and zero enrichment, that ain't happening. I'll just tell you, it's incredibly unlikely to happen. I guess everything is somehow possible, and who knows, maybe some other package of incentives or offers could be issued to Iran that might make them consider. I don't see it. I don't think there's any chance that they would do it, because now then they know that if you have a nuclear weapon, you would have been attacked this way in the first place, and so they may end up doing it anyway. I hope not, but the best way we can do is to lower the tensions by lowering the reason so that they don't run to a bomb. They haven't so far since 2003. That better be accurate. Since 2003, when they signed this fatwa and said no more weapons program, and they did mothball it. They do have the capacity. They had the technological know-how. Even as with all these scientists that have been assassinated, they still have a whole slew of others that can do it. So they can. Let's don't give them a reason to. Let's give them a reason to keep it where it's at and defend themselves and get back to a period of stability to where we can move forward. That's going to have to mean that we have to make some concessions in order to get a negotiated settlement that is still possible, that is still that will impose a lot of restrictions and constraints on Iran, and will make it keep those IAEA inspectors on site so that they can continue to monitor this to give us confidence. We don't have to trust Iran. That's not even part of the equation. We have inspectors on the ground there. I think it's even possible, if we do it right, to where some of these inspectors can be American selected, or maybe even Americans themselves. That's very intrusive, but it's possible. We can do that. If we're wise, we can avoid this war and have a regime in place that will ensure that they don't go to a nuclear weapons program, which, even though it won't make Israel happy, it will keep Israel safe. Because Israel leaders are doing things that aren't keeping them safe right now. It's, in fact, I'll just tag this with as we leave, if it hadn't been for the actions of Benjamin Netanyahu in taking this course of action that had very little chance of success and now has virtually none, all these facilities I just told you about, their refueling facilities, their research facilities, all the things that have been hit, all because of Benjamin Netanyahu. None of them needed to happen, and all of them have. And all those, the video that Gary keeps showing you all this time, every single bit of that is because Netanyahu jumped the gun, would not allow diplomacy to keep him safe, thought he knew better, and now he has gummed it up for everybody. I hope President Trump does not double down on his error and go in further. So we're going to keep monitoring this for you. We have Patrick Henningsen coming up this afternoon. We're going to talk about, we're going to go into some different aspects of this situation here with Patrick, because he knows it really well. And we're also going to talk about some developments in the Russia-Ukraine war, as I've alluded to a little bit here. We'll go into some more detail on that. 1 o'clock with Patrick Henningsen today. Look forward to seeing you then on the Daniel Davis Deep Dive.